Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. Moretti is spelled Moretti, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP. TRIP is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. We're supported by a coalition of transportation organizations who support us as advocates of an efficient, safe, and well-maintained transportation system. Since 1971, TRIP has put over 600 reports at the state, local, and national level, looking at the current conditions of our roads and bridges, traffic congestion levels, traffic safety, and also the impact of the transportation system on the economy. This report is based on an analysis of the latest data, both at the federal and state level, in terms of the condition of the state's transportation system. The key findings of the report is North Carolina has some of the fastest growing travel in the country. From 2000 to 2019, there was a 37% increase in vehicle travel in North Carolina, which is the fifth highest level across the country. Now, obviously, since the pandemic hit, we saw a significant drop of 38% of travel by last spring. But by this fall, vehicle travel in North Carolina is only 4% below the level from the previous year. And so we've obviously seen significant recovery in terms of vehicle travel. And as North Carolina looks to economic recovery and getting through the COVID-19 pandemic, what we've also seen is how absolutely vital our supply chains are. And those rely largely on trucking in North Carolina. And so the reliability and the condition of our transportation system has never been important. In fact, a report that came out earlier this month by the state's NC First Commission found that the state is far behind in adequately funding its transportation system and estimates that the current $5 billion a year being invested in North Carolina's transportation system should actually be about $2 billion a year higher, approximately an additional $20 billion a year to expand, maintain, and improve the safety of North Carolina's transportation system. The TRIP report found that the average motorist in the Research Triangle is spending additional $1,442 annually in the cost of driving on rough roads, which is beating up their vehicles, the value of lost time and wasted fuel due to traffic congestion levels, and finally, the economic cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes in which the lack of adequate roadway safety features were a contributing factor. We also took a look at the condition of the system, and the TRIP report finds that in the Research Triangle area, 14% of major roads have pavements in poor condition and 24% are in mediocre condition. Similarly, the TRIP report found that in the Research Triangle area, 8% of the region's bridges, 1 in 12 bridges, are structurally deficient, and those are bridges that are in need of immediate repair. We also took a look at, as travel in the Research Triangle area and across the state returns to pre-pandemic levels, what that does for the reliability of the system. The report finds that on average, a commuter in the Research Triangle area is spending an additional 40 hours annually stuck in traffic due to traffic congestion, essentially spending 1 week of working time stuck in traffic because of the bottlenecks and congestion in the region. The report also looked at traffic safety, and the report notes that on average over the last 5 years, there have been 95 traffic fatalities annually in the Research Triangle area. And we know that with cost-effective roadway safety features, making improvements like adding rumble strips, adding turn lanes, improving lighting at key intersections, improving facilities for bikes and pedestrians, all of those can have a significant impact on improving safety. And so North Carolina, as you look to significantly reduce those number of traffic fatalities, have to make sure that the transportation system is as safe as possible. TRIP also pointed out in our report that annually $672 billion worth of goods are being moved in North Carolina, mostly on trucks. And the latest estimates through 2045 show that those numbers are approximately going to double in the value of freight being moved in North Carolina. We've certainly seen that through the pandemic, just how vital having a good supply chain is to the health of North Carolina's economy. In conclusion, making those repairs also have a significant impact on improving and in creating jobs. The report found that on average, 110,000 jobs annually are directly tied to the repairs and the projects to improve our transportation system, and about 1.9 million jobs in North Carolina in a variety of sectors are tied directly to the health of our transportation system. That's why the North Carolina Chamber Foundation and North Carolina State University, in a recent report, found that the likelihood of job creation is approximately 3 times higher close to a highway or an interchange that has been improved. And as North Carolina looks at improving and boosting funding in North Carolina, one of those avenues will certainly be the federal program, which currently provides over $1 billion a year to North Carolina for highway and transit improvements. The federal program that money is coming from expires this fall. And so as Congress and the new administration look at the need for additional transportation funding, it will be a critical part of addressing that. I'm going to conclude my comments now. We're going to hear from 2 speakers. We'll hear from Gary Salamito, who's president and CEO of the North Carolina Chamber, and then we'll be hearing from Joe Milazzo, the executive director of the Regional Transportation Alliance Business Coalition. Gary?
Thank you, Rocky, and thank you to Trip. And we really much appreciate the partnership with Trip to put together this really important report about North Carolina transportation by the numbers, to show where we are and to show what the costs are of an inadequate investment in our infrastructure. We've never been at a more important time. So thank you to you and Trip, Rocky, for what you're doing. My name is Gary Salamito. I'm president and CEO of the North Carolina Chamber. And we've long since been looking, and we've commissioned, this is our second report, about what the cost of inaction is to our communities, to our economy, and to the creation of private sector jobs without an adequate investment in infrastructure. The pandemic has made it even more apparent that as we look to regrow jobs, as we look to keep people safe, as we look to get people back to work and materials in and out of our manufacturing facilities, a predictable, reliable infrastructure network is essential to private sector job growth, which is essential to healthy communities. They're all connected together. People in our communities now have been going through tremendous hardships, and now we have an opportunity through investment and diversification of our infrastructure resources to rebuild those communities in a way that makes them vibrant, not only for today, but for the next 50 years. So it's a critical time. That's why the North Carolina Chamber, along with folks like Joe's organization, have formed a coalition called Destination 2030. Destination 2030 is there to encourage our elected officials to take a hard look at where we are and to make some really bold decisions going forward on how we diversify our revenue sources and invest in infrastructure for long-time sustainable, predictable private sector job growth so that our communities can respond, regain, and recover from the pandemic, but most importantly, for North Carolina to continue to lead the country in private sector job growth. The Economic Development Association, organizations like Joe's, the local chambers all across the state have come together to say we're willing to invest, we're willing to invest our time and our resources and our talents. Now we just need our elected officials to work with us and to go forward to make these critical, important investments at a time where it can never be more important. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to a good friend of mine Joe Milazzo, I've learned a lot about in the transportation sector from my days with the Raleigh Chamber and where I met Joe. So Joe, real pleasure to be working with you again, as always. Good to see you, and over to you.
Hey, Joe, if I could just pause for 1 second. I forgot to mention it in my comments that for reporters, if you have a question, there is a raise hand feature on Zoom, or you also use the comment feature. And my colleague Carolyn Kelly will be monitoring that. And then after we hear from Mr. Milazzo, any reporters with a question, what we'll do is elevate you to a panelist so we can hear from you and hopefully see you if you turn your camera on. And then you can interact with and just address questions to any of the 3 speakers. Joe?
Sure. Thank you, Rocky, for that. Thank you for the introduction, Gary, and thank you for the Chamber's strong and needed statewide leadership with this Destination 2030 coalition. The Regional Transportation Alliance Business Leadership Group here in the Research Triangle area is proud to be an engaged member of the coalition that you put together. Rocky, again, thank you and the TRIP team for this detailed report, and happy 50th anniversary to your organization as well. Happy to have you with us. The RTA is a separately funded program of the Raleigh Chamber. Gary mentioned that we consist of more than 100 companies across the Triangle, more than 25 chambers of commerce in Central and Eastern North Carolina. RTA provides our region with an ongoing business-minded voice on transportation initiatives and policies such as the ones we're talking about today. As Rocky has highlighted in his presentation, TRIP's report shows that residents of the Triangle are paying more. We're paying nearly $1,500 in additional costs just from driving in congestion or on less than optimal road surfaces. And as Gary has pointed out, stronger investments in transportation infrastructure will help the residents of our state and this region by supporting our post-pandemic recovery. And a renewed commitment to transportation will undoubtedly have positive impacts on the entire economy. Since this past summer, RTA and other members of the statewide Destination 2030 coalition that's been organized here by the North Carolina Chamber have collaborated on these issues. Like Gary has said, our goal is to make sure the business community is focused on this, that we've got a seat at the table on the transportation policy issue and a voice to make our ideas heard and move them forward. We are hopeful that our efforts will fuel, no pun, a broader awareness of the need to address these issues among the business community. I think there's already been substantial progress on this objective. We've had more than 100 organizations join the Chamber's Destination 2030 coalition from multiple North Carolina industries, as well as organizations like our own. Being a little more specific, we do recognize that the motor fuels tax, well, while it's still an important part right now, it's going to continue to be a little more unviable as we go, and frankly, a little more unfair as vehicles become more fuel efficient. And on top of that, it will continue to be more volatile as economic downturns occur, just like the ones we're facing right now. The members of this coalition have put forth a number of ideas to begin slowly, steadily phasing out the motor fuels tax, create the more sustainable streams of transportation revenue that Gary mentioned. We've been using resources like the North Carolina First Commission that NCDOT put together. Their final report just released. Also, the earlier report released last year by the North Carolina Chamber Foundation. Some of those ideas: an expanded highway use tax. Some folks are talking about mileage-based user fees. Others reallocating some sales tax revenues for transportation. RTA, our group, have talked about a vehicle registration-based access fee approach. There's a number of concepts, but the bottom line's clear. We do need to begin to act, and this is the time really to begin to act now, to begin building that more effective and sustainable transportation funding stream here in North Carolina. If not, we're going to continue to see those costs that TRIP has found in their report continue to pile up for the people of our state, and it's going to impact commerce and quality of life. The business community in the Research Triangle area, like all the other Destination 2030 partners across the state, we stand ready to assist our elected leaders in identifying and activating the solutions that will help us to secure a more stronger future for transportation here in North Carolina. And as I mentioned, this is an opportunity we cannot afford to miss. Again, I want to thank Gary Salamita with the North Carolina Chamber, Rocky Moretti with TRIP. I'd like to turn it back over to Rocky for the Q&A portion of the event, and also Carolyn Kelly with TRIP. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Carolyn, I'll let you sort of just moderate this if there are any questions, or we can wait a couple of minutes and see if they come in.
Sure. Thanks, Rocky. As Rocky noted, we will have an opportunity for Q&A. So if there are any reporters who would like to ask a question of one of the panelists, you can either use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and enter your question or just a notification that you'd like to ask it into that box, or you can use the raise hand function over on the side and then I'll be able to call on you and elevate you to a presenter so that you can ask your question of the panelists live and ask any follow-up questions as well. So at the moment, I don't see any hands up or any questions in the Q&A box.
But I've got one.
Joe, go ahead while we wait for any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just wanted to mention that as you go through this report, and whether the reporter's looking at it now or looking at it later, we think about the important reports like TRIPS, and it's really an important level set. It's almost like getting a checkup from a trusted outside partner. I think it's really important, and it highlights the importance of the investment. But as I was thinking through, Gary, your remarks, and I was thinking through what Rocky said, I did want to mention this. When you think about a growing market like the Research Triangle area or the state of North Carolina overall, the reasons you want to make that investment, there's really three. It's save time, it's lower costs, and it's create opportunity. And I think those are the ones that kind of stick in my mind over and over again. Saves time for commerce, saves time for travelers, commuters, people going to and from work. It lowers our cost. Rocky mentioned all the different costs that people, not just this market, but across the state are facing. And it creates opportunity, certainly for the transportation industry, but through improved efficiency for all of us. So I just want to mention that in terms of what I consider the big three that really came to the forefront based on your report, Rocky.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Carolyn, if there's not any questions, I'll just point out that our contact information is on all of the press material, and certainly I'm available other than an 11 o'clock and noon media event for further conversation if any reporters want to get back to me.
I do see one question from Brian Schrader at WRIL. So Brian, I've just elevated you to a panelist. You'll need to unmute your line, but you can go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, everybody. As I listen to this presentation and look at these issues that are facing everybody at North Carolina, this is a pretty tall task, it would seem, to make these kinds of changes. What kind of response are you getting from elected officials as you talk with them about these issues?
Gary, I'll turn that over to you in terms of some of the folks your chamber team may have had as you've just begun some of those conversations, I would think.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And thank you for the question, Brian. Well, we're getting a good response in terms of they understand that it's an important issue for our state. They understand that we need to look at how we lead and how we make sure we make these investments in a thoughtful way before all the population comes here that we know will come here. And they understand the importance of it to their communities all the time, but particularly now during pandemic recovery, the importance of making these investments to help the jobs come back and help jobs continue to be a real strength for North Carolina. So good conversations. We're having thoughtful conversations, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, and I will add to that. And Brian, I also appreciate the question. From what we've seen, it just initially in conversations, even within the business community broadly, there's no immediate consensus on the one perfect solution, but there's an absolute consensus that we need to have an efficient, safe, and well-maintained system because there's no question this state's continuing to grow, this market's continuing to grow. And so the only question is the how, and we're pleased to already hear that consensus.
And I've not seen any other questions come in. We'll give that one more minute if there are any last minute questions. I'll also note that the recording of this news conference will be available on the TRIP website within the next hour or so. So if you'd like to get the high quality video there or review anything that was said today, that'll all be available on our website along with the full report and the news releases. And also Rocky's taped a few broadcast quality video clips that reporters can use as well in their pieces. So with that, I don't see any other questions. I'll turn it back over to you, Rocky.
Okay, well, thanks again to everyone who tuned in this morning, and thanks, of course, to Gary and Joe for your comments. And with that, we'll end our Zoom call. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Rocky. Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rocky. Thank you, Joe. And Brian for coming in, Carolyn, everybody. Thank you. And let's continue to save time, lower costs, and create opportunity.